So this is kind of a topic or a question I've been wanting to dive into for a while, but of course, covering the West Virginia athletic program, a lot has happened throughout the summer, and some of that's about the football program, some of that's not, of course, and that's about the basketball program and Bob Huggins. But now that we're able to kind of get back in the swing of things into football, right on the precipice of camp and a new season on the horizon, wanted to dive back into a major contributor who is a new face and a new Mountaineer, and that is Devin Carter. Devin Carter transferring from North Carolina State to West Virginia, was at NC State for a while, put up some numbers there, but now going to be the number one at West Virginia. And he's going to need to fill a pretty big role with Bryce Ford Wheaton now with the Giants pursuing his NFL career. They had to really retool the entire receiver room, and Devin Carter right now is that diamond addition. But if you look at the numbers, and some have asked me this, why would he walk right in and being the number one wide receiver when his numbers at NC State don't really say that that's the case for him? Certainly lesser than what Bryce Ford Wheaton offered. And there were some that thought he kind of dipped in production last year and maybe should have gave more, would have been a draft pick if he did, had some great moments, had some moments where he floundered too. So how does Devin Carter jump in as the one? They have a relationship. Devin to WVU. We talked a little bit about this with Neil Brown in the past, but I wanted to actually talk Devin Carter and what he could bring to the table and really who he is as a player, and if he's going to translate into a number one role in the Big 12 from what he was in the ACC with somebody that actually covers North Carolina State. So again, I'm Mike Asti, and this is West Virginia Sports Now, and I'm going to bring on Ethan McDowell, who covers NC State. He's a part of the team there at the Wolfpacker and also a member of On3.com. And we're going to talk some Devin Carter and maybe on and off the field, as his exit from North Carolina State was a bit odd, just from what we know out there publicly. So I'll see as much as we can get on that subject as well. So Ethan, first off, how are you? I appreciate you joining me here for sure.
Doing well, Mike. Thanks for having me on, man.
Absolutely. Yeah, you came as a referral, so I'm taking the word for it. Some respected colleagues, so I definitely appreciate the time. This is a part of why social media is kind of so cool for us in media to be able to just quickly send a text and be doing this 20 some minutes later. But I guess we'll jump in. As I said in the open, Devin Carter walks to Morgantown and is immediately handed the role as number one wide receiver. That's pretty rare. I don't know what you know about Neil Brown, but for all his faults and the record needs to be better, he doesn't just hand roles to people. He makes them usually work for it. And, you know, he even actually wouldn't announce that a major quarterback transfer was the guy last year until right at the start of the season when everyone knew he was. So to kind of just agree that Devin Carter's the number one right away maybe was a bit odd and a little different than how Neil Brown normally handles things. But that's the case. But his numbers at NC State weren't eye-popping by any means, even though he was on a good Wolfpack team last year. So do you think Devin Carter can be a number one wide receiver for a major program team where he is the guy in, say, the Big 12, which is a little different than the ACC? Or are you kind of wondering that's probably going to be a struggling offense if Devin Carter's your top guy?
So from like 2019 to 2021, he was like an awesome second or third option, like one of the best in the ACC, put up really impressive numbers, had 6 touchdowns in 2021. He's pretty much your prototypical perfect possession receiver. He'll get you those jump balls. He's a great red zone guy, someone you can really rely on in that area of the field and can also go up and make some big plays. Then going into 2022, he was in position to kind of, take on that number one role, right? On the outside, they needed him to step into that. And I don't think we got a good enough picture to really come away with a full take of that because he battled some injuries. I'm not sure how familiar you were with NC State's 2022 season, but they had to play 4 different starting quarterbacks because Devin Leary got hurt.
Yeah, I did hear that. Right, yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure we got a crystal clear picture of what Devin Carter can be as the number one option in the offense. But I mean, you look at him, he's a 6'3", 215-pound receiver. He showed he can do pretty much anything on the football field. And going into last year, I was really excited to see him in that role. And I feel like he didn't get the full opportunity to maybe display what he could do this season at West Virginia.
Yeah, and that's the point of the transfer for him. He wants the opportunity. He wants to be a number one, as much as him and Bryce Ford Wheaton have a personal relationship that goes back a long time. Neil Brown has kind of joked about this too. I don't think Devin Carter would be at West Virginia if Bryce Ford Wheaton was still there, because he wants to be in the number one. And Bryce Ford Wheaton obviously would still be that guy, so you probably would never see him together, no matter what would happen with Bryce and his NFL dreams. And going to Devin Carter's numbers, you did mention the expectation to be a number one entering last season. That was a good NC State team, despite the quarterback carousel that kind of went on there. Kind of odd for a bowl team. 25 catches, 406 yards, had a couple touchdowns. Year before, 31, 29. The year before that, 32 catches. So never more than 32 catches. Only 1 year with over 500 yards. That was 556 in 2021. You mentioned him as a solid 2 or 3 guy. It's not like North Carolina State has the reputation of being this offense that just wows you with 35, 40 points a game either during that stretch. And again, West Virginia, they're also adding a lot of other pieces. They're going to be receivers that are going to complement him. What exactly made you confident heading into last year prior to knowing all the injuries that were going to occur, and maybe still allows you to have some excitement from afar that as a physical athlete that you've watched play, that he can be a number one? Because when you're a number one, just before we even get to seeing him on the field with West Virginia, I think it's fair to saying major college football in a Power 5, at minimum, you got to give me 500 yards. You certainly got to get probably 35, 40, if not 50 catches. And that's like lower bars. That's below Bryce Ford Wheaton, who was criticized a lot last year. If he puts these numbers up at WVU, that's going to probably be a failure in terms of the transfer, I would imagine.
So, yeah, I mean, kind of going back to last year, or 2 years ago, I should say, he had 31 receptions at 556 yards.
Right.
And I think that was enough from what I gathered going into 2022. There was a lot of confidence from the staff.
Okay.
I think the staff was maybe kind of in a similar place to where West Virginia's staff is right now. They see him as that number one guy. And I think there was a kind of a similar feeling around NC State, or at least if he wasn't the number one guy, he would be an excellent, excellent number two option.
Yeah.
From what I saw going into it, I saw a guy that, like I said, he goes up and wins jump balls. It's a great skill to have as a receiver in college football. And
Yeah.
the one big thing is he shows up in big games. NC State fans loved him because he was huge against UNC 2 years in a row. Obviously, that's their biggest rival.
Okay.
And last year, playing with the fourth string quarterback, he had 6 catches for 130 yards and a touchdown against the Tar Heels in a really exciting win. So the highs with Devin Carter are really, really high, and I think it's more just about seeing that consistently. And
Okay.
there's nothing that leads me to believe that's not possible if he kind of returns to like a more healthy than he was last year.
Yeah, Ethan McDowell here from the Wolfpacker and on3.com, WV Sports Now. We're talking Devin Carter, and now the number one at West Virginia, was a top receiver at North Carolina State and finishing out his college eligibility now at WVU, looking to put bigger numbers up and really be that number one guy. And it does feel like, from others I've talked to as well, the potential's there. And you mentioned the stats being similar. West Virginia maybe kind of was where North Carolina State was a year ago, where what do you have to lose here? I mean, Neil Brown's in his 5th year. If this doesn't go well, he's going to be gone. You needed a number one. You lose your one. You lose a lot of the room. If you feel like the potential is there and a guy wants to come, hard to say no. And if they have to hand him the role right away, then I guess that's fine. Now, from watching a lot of North Carolina State football, what for people that don't know, what's the Wolfpack offense like? Schematically, style, how did Devin Carter fit into that in comparison to, I'll tell you, West Virginia now? They've had an air raid style offense. Obviously, last year with Graham Harrell, it wasn't a traditional air raid because they did run a lot for an air raid. This year with Graham gone, they promoted a guy who basically ran the running game the last several years and Chad Scott to be offensive coordinator. Neil Brown's going to call plays, though, and it's going to be a lot more of a traditional West Virginia kind of led by the running game. A lot of running backs, other wide receivers. I would imagine they're going to even involve a tight end now in Cole Taylor, who's a transfer from LSU, who also looking to put up big numbers that maybe hasn't to this point, but has potential. So Devin Carter, it appears, going to be in a different offense than he was in North Carolina State. Maybe that'll be a benefit of him, maybe not. But what type of offense was he in the last several years?
Yeah, so it sounds like NC State's kind of doing the opposite of West Virginia. They just hired Robert Anae from Syracuse, the big air raid guy. So they're kind of implementing that right now. But they had Tim Beck as their offensive coordinator last year. He's the head coach at Coastal Carolina right now. And honestly, it kind of sounds a little kind of similar to what West Virginia will be doing this year. Actually, they wanted to rely on their running game. I think injuries kind of forced them to rely a little more on making plays through the air. And obviously, when you have Devin Leary as your quarterback, you're going to air it out a little bit more. Yeah. But I think it sounds a little bit similar to what he'll be seeing.
What North Carolina State's going to do is similar, or what Devin Carter was in?
What Devin Carter was in.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And again, that might also be something that is an issue if you're trying to put up numbers too, because obviously Devin Carter wants to eventually get to the league, and we'll get to a moment how North Carolina State thought maybe he was going there. But when you're in an offense like West Virginia is going to be in, or maybe that's the reason why his numbers weren't bigger at North Carolina State the last several years, you're not going to probably be a Biletnikoff winner getting 60 receptions in that type of offense. So maybe the offense also can hold you back as well, and we'll see. But if he can put up big plays, especially in big games, because West Virginia has a lot of them, including week 1 at Penn State, then that's going to be a big need for the Mountaineers for sure. Now, I know you maybe don't have direct insight to this because we talked a little bit off the air, but it's out there publicly that his exit from North Carolina State was, I wouldn't say bad, but it was odd. It was just odd. Bowl game, and despite 4 quarterbacks playing, West Virginia had 3 last year. They do make a bowl game, so right there, that's kind of a successful year to overcome that adversity. So it's not like the vibes were bad, like say with West Virginia 5-7 last year. And says, hey, just really quickly, like we had all our players that wanted to play in this game. It's not a major bowl game, but we're still excited. We want to play in this. The Duke's Mayo Bowl. We're going to put a trophy up. Like, it's the world where a lot of people sit out non-major bowl games. We're playing. The only one that we don't got here is Devin Carter because he's going to go to the NFL. We congratulate him and wish him well. And then Devin jumps on Twitter and says, that's just not true. I'm not going to the NFL. I want to someday, but I'm going to the transfer portal, actually. And then pretty soon after that, he ends up transferring to West Virginia, and we all know about the connection with Bryce Ford Wheaton. And, there's some tea leaves there that it appeared that maybe he was already leaning toward WVU and Bryce already in his ear either prior or right around the time of that press conference. So it just felt murky that I don't know why he wouldn't tell North Carolina State or why they would say that if that wasn't out there. Just anything you heard on that or just from other colleagues? Like, was that just one of those where you were probably browsing on Twitter thinking, like, why is Devin throwing a grenade on this for no reason? Like, how could they be so much not on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, clearly there was some sort of miscommunication. I don't have a ton of insight into what happened there, but clearly Coach Dave Doran told us one thing that he clearly believed was the truth, and then Devin Carter refuted that on Twitter. I don't have much insight into that. Otherwise.
Yeah, that's fair. It was just a weird thing out there that was out there public that I even asked Neil Brown about, and Neil Brown's obviously not going to trash another coach, but he laughed. Like his initial reaction was like, "Yeah, it's kind of funny." But being around Devin Carter, just colleagues that were around him, and even covering him over the years, anything that you ever heard that any Mountaineer fan should be worried about? Because they did have some drama with some players last year in some kind of similar situations, say with Charles Woods that I just described with Devin Carter, with a hard schedule, a lot of pressure, needing to win right now. The last thing West Virginia needs is a player going to go at a coach on Twitter. So have you heard anything like that? Or is that just a really bizarre, isolated incident that you don't think is going to trickle into Morgantown?
Yeah, I don't think that I don't think that is that exchange was a sign of any larger issue.
Okay.
Every interaction I've ever had with Devin has been incredibly positive, super nice to the media, happy to do interviews, and I've never heard anything that suggests he's anything less than a great person.
Yeah, and I've been around him now from spring ball and was a great guy there, was friendly to the media, was nice to the media there. We hope to actually get more availability with him coming up in fall camp. So he was just kind of working on his craft there at spring ball. I don't have as many interactions as even you would have to this point. But yeah, I didn't hear anything about that. I haven't heard anything about that either. It's just a really odd, maybe something to joke about someday. I don't know. Just kind of funny situation that exists. Now, even going back to Devin Carter, the player, what do you think he needs to do to get to the next level? Like, for example, with Bryce Ford Wheaton last year, he actually mentioned in Indianapolis at the combine that man-to-man coverage is something that he needed to work on. He never felt he perfected in college, and he knows he has to get better at to be able to have success in the NFL. And maybe that's why he wasn't actually drafted and had to sign as undrafted free agent with the Giants. What does Devin Carter for you need to work on to have a big year at West Virginia, to make these questions go away, and to get an opportunity at the National Football League, whether it be in the draft or as a free agent? Because he's verbally said he wants to be in the NFL. The program in North Carolina State that saw him for the last 4 to 5 years thought he was an NFL player. The numbers do not say that. So why is he an NFL player, and what does he need to work on maybe to get there?
Yeah, I'd honestly just like to see him take the top off the defense a few more times, kind of show off some next level speed, blow past some more cornerbacks. Because, like I said, he can go up and win a 50-50 ball against, I think, pretty much any corner that they'll see this year. But I think maybe it's about running a few more routes and burning a couple guys to create a couple more 80-20 balls, get himself a few more wide open opportunities and see if we can make things happen that way. But because I mean, if you look at his average yards per reception, it was at like 14 yards as a sophomore, then 16, and then peaked in 2021 at 17.9. You probably wanted around that to kind of, and with increased production than that 31 receptions. If you could maintain that average with a bigger volume, then I think you're looking at someone with NFL type potential.
Yeah, and you never know too what NFL teams are looking at, because Bryce ran a 4.38, thinking he was kind of dispelling some of his doubters, and it didn't get him drafted still. So, but he did end up signing with the Giants. But yeah, the numbers per catch, and it seems like once he caught the ball, he can certainly do something with it, and he has the size. I mean, Devin definitely looks like he has the size from just being around him. And it will be about the one-on-one balls and even the 50-50 balls and dealing with corners and things like that. If he can win those battles, that'll be big. It'll be a question mark on what type of volume he gets. I would wonder if he gets tons more volume, or what he's expecting even out of the West Virginia offense, because it's even going to be more run heavy than it was last year with Bryce. And Bryce's numbers weren't exactly maybe what Bryce would have thought they should have been volume wise, but they also dealt with a quarterback carousel that we talked about earlier. So maybe West Virginia can find some continuity there with whoever they end up having to start, because they're in a competition still. Then maybe that also could be a benefit to Devin Carter as well. Ethan, I definitely appreciate the time for sure. Is there anything else Devin Carter related you want to get out there? I just wanted to dispel some questions that I think Mountaineer fans have, because outside of a spring game, no one's able to see anything from Devin Carter to this point, and you walk right into a position room as the guy without necessarily eye-popping numbers. It does maybe raise some questions, but he could easily be as legit as advertised.
How did he do in the spring game?
He was good. Yeah, I mean, he looked good in the spring game. From what I recall right now, just off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean, there were like Cole Taylor again stood out in the spring game. They were kind of trying out multiple quarterbacks there. So you got Nico and Garrett Green. They're in a quarterback competition. Garrett looked better in the spring game. But yeah, I don't recall anything to this point on or off the field jumping out that Devin Carter couldn't be the guy. He's actually, from what I heard from coaches too, and kind of been experiencing around from spring ball, been a leader in the room. Like, he's taken other receivers under his wing and said, hey, I saw this should be over here. If this happens, do this. He's acting like a leader that's been one of the best receivers in the country so far. And he's a veteran leader. He's much more experienced, certainly with major conference ball, than anyone else as a receiver right now in the room. So, and even really overall weapon wise, except maybe Cole Taylor. So he's going to have a pretty big role, for better or worse. But he's done everything he's been asked to do, and he's looked good so far, whether it be on the field in practice in the spring game or even just mentoring the room so far. So we will see. The schedule's not going to be easy again. Got that game against Penn State right away, and then maybe put up some numbers against Duquesne. We'll see how long he plays there. But there's pressure on the West Virginia team, and certainly pressure on Devin Carter individually. Ethan, again, I appreciate the time. We'll be maybe talking somewhere down the line. We'll see how Devin Carter does with West Virginia. I'm sure you'll be checking in from afar.
Sounds good. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Again, Ethan McDowell from the Wolfpacker and on3.com. So give a dap to Matt Carter from the Wolfpacker, who I was actually originally going to have on to talk about Devin Carter. I know he maybe would have had a little bit more direct insight. Things didn't work out schedule-wise, is what he told me he's doing with his house. I think he's painting or something, so he wasn't video ready and had to do a lot around the house. I hear that. I don't know if that's more fun than this or not. And I also wanted to get this show out there. And then, of course, also Mark Ryan, who is a radio guy and a colleague of mine who does radio with Odyssey down there in South Carolina and has certainly talked North Carolina State in the past and originally recommended Matt. But still, great stuff from Ethan there. And the numbers maybe don't jump out at you, but again, the offenses were similar. He's now going to be in a similar situation with West Virginia, and we will see what he does in the 2023 season.